This boy suffered the greatest injustice of all, and because of that they are all going to pay. They laughed at him for being weak and having no talent for magic. In this world, anyone without talent faces a horrible future. But Rain possessed intelligence, and for that everyone envied him. His dream was always to be a great mage, just like the Magic Tower Master. The MC dedicated himself to the max and studied more than anyone. Thanks to that, he invented something extraordinary for mages. His professor said Verdun was a great genius and would become famous. But he betrayed him, stole his research, and presented it as his own. Verdun in despair went to the Tower Master and reported everything, hoping to get credit for his years of work. But unfortunately, Balro Bess, upon hearing that the boy was a genius smarter than everyone else, even without magic talent, imprisoned him. He turned the protagonist into a guinea pig for magic experiments. In the Bohemia Magic Tower, the most powerful in the Empire, the Tower Master and his talented students used Verdun to test dangerous spells and magic potions. The reason for such injustice was simply because he was so intelligent, even without magical talent. For that, he must pay. After years, anyone would have had their spirit broken, but Verdun filled himself with a more powerful sentiment, the same one Itachi placed in his brother. While imprisoned, the boy had only the memories of his childhood friend. He and Rollin swore they would become great mages together. They made a promise, and that memory was burning in his mind. He cannot break that promise. So if in this world talent surpasses intelligence, Vidin convinces himself perhaps he can transform his intelligence into talent, break the limits, and surpass everything and everyone. For 7 years, he dedicated himself to a new theory that will change the world. When he was in his cell, he practiced every day. Despite being a prisoner, the mage forced Verdun to work in the tower doing cleaning duty. His friend Rovelin always visited him, and one day told him she was moving to another place and asked him to run away with her. The truth is she doesn't know the truth about how Verdun lives in the magic tower. Verdun refused. He cannot run away. He has plans for the people of this place. On that same day, people were enjoying the magic festival. This will be the ideal moment for his revenge. Verdun went to the treasure room and claimed the Tower Master ordered him to clean the place. This is where the Master's greatest invention is kept, a magic amplification artifact. Verdun worked for 7 years to figure out how to break the seal and use the artifact. In the room housing the tower's energy source, 2 mages were on guard duty on the day of the magic festival, so they were irritated. Verdun discreetly entered the room and began his final plan. The bearded mage didn't even know how he died. The green-haired mage was stunned by what he saw and questioned how a piece of trash without talent has the nerve to attack a mage. He was determined to eliminate Verdun, but what happened was astonishing. The MC used a powerful Thurtle spell, and it was fatal. The mage was defeated when he had only a few seconds of life left. Verdun warned him it would have been better to treat people with more care. After taking care of the guards, the protagonist was facing the heart of the tower. The energy core is the most important thing of all. He is going to use its mana to execute the spell that will defy the heavens and break logical limits. Using the artifact and the tower's mana core, Verdun drew all the magic circles and activated the spell. There are 2 results. Either it will work or he will die. Even kilometers away, the Tower Master saw the blue light reaching the heavens. The mage knew his magic tower was in that direction. Brog flew as fast as possible, thinking he would destroy whoever was responsible. Upon arriving, he saw only the mage's silhouette. It didn't matter to him if it was the Emperor himself or a great mage. He was going to destroy him. When he tried to strike him, all Brog found was a teleportation magic circle. The strongest mage in the Empire was unable to discover who destroyed his tower. And soon he's going to lose more than just his tower. And GT. Elsewhere, the morning dawned peacefully in a sunlit forest. In this environment, the sound of flowing water began to catch his attention. With a sudden plunge, he fell abruptly into a river. Sitting on the bank, he tried to understand where he was and how he got there. Looking at his reflection in the water, he realized that his appearance had been completely altered. Even without understanding, he touched his face, trying to recognize himself. Faced with the transformation, he questioned whether the body reconstruction process had turned him into another person. At that moment, he remembered encountering the wizards, challenging the heavens, and escaping with teleportation magic before being caught. Finally, he concluded that this was how he ended up in that unfamiliar forest. Noticing the different vegetation, he understood that he had never been there and that the plants were not the same as those in the tower. With that, he smiled, realizing that the teleportation had successfully taken him to the other side of the continent. Thus, he celebrated having executed his transformation plan and escaped using the magic circle. Lying on the grass, he began to laugh at the thought of the master's fury, certain that no one would discover his identity. Despite the victory, he acknowledged that his attack had not been enough to completely bring down the magical tower. Still, he recalled that the enemy certainly had countermeasures and did not earn the title of the Omnipotent by chance. Even so, he decided that the plan had worked for now, and that he would use the tower's reconstruction time to strengthen himself for revenge. With his hand raised to the sky, he swore to destroy everything the master had built, so that the name Verdun would be etched in history. After determining that revenge and self-affirmation were his only purpose, he stretched and mentally bid farewell to the tower for the time being. Not far away, a goblin struck a wooden box with its axe. Without wasting time, Verdun extended his hand and conjured the wind cutter spell. The blade of air advanced and sliced the goblin in half before the creature realized the danger. As he walked, he analyzed his hand and concluded that the sensation of using magic remained the same. He deduced that although the reconstruction had changed his hair and eyes, his mana capacity had remained unchanged. Kicking the body aside, he understood that due to the presence of goblins, he must be far from any village. At that moment, marks beside the box caught his attention. Kneeling, he identified tracks of a cart and deduced that someone had hastily abandoned the cargo. With the intention of finding the owner, Verdun decided to use mana detection on the box. As soon as he activated the spell, a trail of energy shot out following the marks left by the vehicle. Further ahead, a man urges the horses to run as fast as possible. In panic, the driver tries to understand how he ended up in that situation. A memory shows him surrounded by bandits, who should have already been exterminated. Another memory reveals that neither the mention of a baron nor the escape of his mercenaries were the real problem. What truly terrified him was the appearance of an orc with a macker smile among the bandits. He recalls the luck he had in escaping while the orc was distracted massacring the others. Back in the present, a loud sound startles him, making him believe he is being pursued. Desperate, he whips the horses to make them run even faster. Suddenly, the cart's wheel hits a route and brakes, causing the vehicle to stop abruptly. With the impact, the driver is violently thrown to the ground. Trying to get up, he supports himself on his back, panting and in pain. At that moment, he turns alert upon sensing a presence approaching. Ahead, dozens of pairs of eyes appear in the darkness of the forest. Orcs and goblins emerge from the shadows and surround him, leading him to lament his fate. Without delay, the creatures charge all at once. Certain that everything was over, the man simply closes his eyes and waits for the blow. In the last instant, a massive wall of earth rises from the ground, blocking the creature's attack. Observing the scene, Verdun comments that he forgot to leave an opening for the man to breathe. Thus, the orc leader turns and stares intently at the newcomer. From atop the rock, he decides that he needs to eliminate all the monsters before the victim runs out of air. While concentrating a flame in his hand, he views that moment as his first real battle. In response, the orc leader roars and charges forward with the other monsters. With a smile, he realizes that this is the perfect opportunity to test his new combat skills. Thus, multiple fire arrows rain down on the monsters, decimating the first wave of attack. As the flames spread, the orc leader remains standing, completely unharmed by the spell. Then, with a roar, the creature orders the surviving goblins to advance toward the wizard. As soon as they receive the command, the enemies run and begin to climb the rock to reach the conjurer. For his part, the young man prepares to invoke two spells at once, combining fire, arrows, and whirlwind. Using the double casting technique, he merges the two magical circles into one. Then the sorcerer points downward and activates the heat wave arrow against the enemies. Soon, a massive explosion of fire consumes all the goblins that were advancing. After the attack, the charred bodies of the creatures begin to disintegrate into ashes. In light of the result, the young man reflects that he wouldn't have been able to defeat a single goblin before. Looking at the battlefield, he confirms that none of the smaller monsters survived. With that, he decides to turn back to the wall of earth, determined to free the man before he runs out of air. Suddenly, the hand of the orc leader emerges from behind the rock and reaches toward him. Before he could react, the wizard turns in complete shock. Sometime later, the now repaired cart travels peacefully down the road. Inside the vehicle, the man who introduces himself as Connor promises that he will never forget what happened. With that, he thanks his savior for protecting his life and wonders how he can repay the favor. Not giving it much importance, the conjurer merely warns him to keep his eyes on the road or he will tip the cart again. Soon after, Conrad asks if he was in danger during the fight against the monsters. With his eyes closed, the young man thinks that the situation was only a little dangerous. Then a quick memory makes him recall the exact moment he noticed the attack from the surviving orc. The recollection shows the creature from behind as it prepared to spell up close. Thus, using the wind cutter, he managed to slice the monster in half before being crushed. Back in the present, the wizard smiles and assures Conrad that there is nothing to worry about. Shortly after, he asks about the frequency of thieves in the area as they tend to avoid places with monsters. With that, the traveler explains that the forest is under the control of Baron Pyth, and that the thieves should have been defeated. For this reason, he traveled without mercenaries, leading the conjurer to conclude that his teleportation took him to the right territory. Even with his tracks erased, he decides that he will need to hide his identity and grow stronger in case he is sought after. When questioned by Conrad, he realizes that he had not introduced himself yet. With that, he formally reveals himself as Asher, deciding that he will only use the name Verdun again when facing the master of the tower. Soon, the cart arrives at its destination, the estate of the Baron of the Pith territory. As soon as they arrive, the local noble questions Conrad about what happened upon seeing him in that state. In response, the man jokes that he must have lost weight while fleeing from the orcs. Finally, the Baron apologizes for the incident, but Conrad reassures him, saying it was not his fault. Then, the noble identifies the young mage as the one responsible for saving his friend and states that he cannot stand idly by in light of such a feat. With that, the Baron gives the order for the guest to be taken to the castle. Now, in new clothes, the young man formally thanks him for the hospitality, the clothes, and the food. The noble then accepts the thanks with a smile. Shortly after, he introduces himself as Baron P. the Henrod, the lord of that territory, and invites him to sit down. During dinner, the host asks if the food is to the guest's liking, receiving a positive response. As a reward for saving Conrad, the Baron offers him the sum of 5 million elk. Additionally, he takes the opportunity to propose a job with good pay. After considering the offer, the guest sets his fork down on the table and asks what the job entails. The Baron begins to explain that days ago, bodies of residents from a neighboring town were found in the southern forest. Even with the town in ruins, the investigation found no traces of the culprits, as if everything had been erased by magic. Faced with the speculation of a mage among the bandits, the young man interrupts and asks when they plan to hunt them down. With a smile, the Lord answers his question. 4 days later, the conjurer joins the hunting group gathered at the castle gate, ready for the mission. Soon a knight approaches and introduces himself as Enoch, the commander in charge of the plan. Then Enoch introduces his companions Harris and Peric, who greet the newcomer enthusiastically. Returning the gesture, the young man shakes the commander's hand and formally introduces himself to the group. While reflecting on the Baron's proposal, he decides to accept the job of hunting bandits as payment for his stay. Noticing a large group of people gathered, he asks Enoch if they are also part of the plan. The commander then explains that they are adventurers drawn by rumors of the recent appearance of a strange orc. With that, he adds that the good reward has attracted even gold-rank adventurers. The mage recalls that adventurers of that level are veterans comparable to knights capable of using energy to strengthen their bodies and weapons. Already in the forest, he questions the need for his presence as the group already has 3 knights and other warriors. At that moment, Enoch asks him to alert if he detects a mage, making him suspect the true reason for his hiring. In response, the commander explains that a mage's long-range spells make it very difficult for the knights to approach. With that, the young man states that the situation is unfortunate, leaving the group leader completely on alert. Soon after, he stops in the middle of the path, causing everyone to halt their march along with him. Then, the conjurer extends his hand and warns that there is a magical circle ahead just before using the disperse spell. With the magic, a huge trap hidden in the air is revealed to everyone. The group members react in surprise, wondering how something like that could exist there. Soon, the mage explains that the spells serve as camouflage and a warning for the user, asking everyone to stay back. Without hesitation, he concentrates energy between his hands and fires a spell that opens a direct path through the forest. Enoch watches the scene, completely surprised. Given the ease with which the magic was undone, the commander questions the true identity of the young man. Thus, the explorers are members of guilds that accept missions to explore territories or repel monsters that threaten people. Even with death always nearby, an adventurer's skill is admired for bringing wealth and fame. Over time, some become so strong that they lose control and abandon their honor to attack other humans. In the end, they become nothing more than bandits, like the leader of the group, who laments his situation in the forest. Next to a carcass, the chief complains that the damages from the last attack have not yet been resolved, and that they are now out of food. With that, he orders his men to stop watching and immediately go out to hunt something to eat. Hidden in the brush, the knights identify the group as their target and wait for Commander Enoch's orders. As soon as the leader of the warriors decides to attack to take advantage of the enemy's low guard, the mage stops him and asks him to wait a moment. Then he reminds him that they have not yet assessed the enemy's strength and that they could lose if the rival conjurer is stronger. Even so, Enoch shows concern about the possibility of the bandits starting to move. In light of the situation, the young man claims there is a way to resolve the impasse while observing the enemies. While one of the criminals, Varja, complains about the effort to expand the area and about the dead recruit, the sorcerer tells him to stop. With a sigh, Varja laments that an orc has killed his subordinates and reflects on how his life has changed since he became a bandit. Soon, he suggests to Vilshin that they attack another village, but the mage refuses the idea due to the Baron's wrath. Vilshin then reveals that it is time for them to move and that he has heard of a nearby town called Mart. As he planned to loot the village, a fire spell was shot in his direction. Shortly after, a strong explosion erupted in the bandits' camp. Faced with the surprise attack, Vilshin conjured a defense circle and confirmed that it was indeed magic. With the certainty that they had been discovered, the group of knights and adventurers charged into combat. Immediately, the battlefield turned into a chaotic confrontation between the two sides. Amid the confusion, one of the adventurers managed to strike Vilshin on the head with a blow. Seeing the scene, Varger turned in shock towards his fallen companion. The leader of the outlaws then analyzed that the mana barrier, despite being quick, was fragile and that its breakage impacted the user. With the mage defeated, the young conjurer presented himself before Enoch and offered to take care of the rest of the battle. Thus, Varger realized that the Baron was truly determined to eliminate them as he had hired a mage. Even so, he refused to accept the plan and cross swords directly with Commander Enoch. With that, he swore he would send their heads as a response to the Baron, receiving a challenge from Enoch in return. During the confrontation, the young conjurer chased Vilshin through a ravine while the enemy tried to escape. While fleeing, the bandit realized that his pursuer was using the earth wall, concluding that he was a mage. From below, Vilshin questioned his opponent's delay and decided to attack first, casting multiple ice arrows. Confident that he was facing only a second circle mage, he advanced to eliminate him before fleeing. In response, the young man engulfed himself in flames and counterattacked with the spell multiple fire arrows. After the smoke cleared, the battlefield was covered in particles of magic under the sunset light. Kneeling and wounded, Vilshin acknowledged the strength of his opponent, but claimed he had chosen the wrong enemy. As the hunter approached, the mage assured him that without the knight, he could defeat him alone and escape. Just ahead, the adversary stated that he had no intention of letting him flee. With that, Vilshin praised his enemy's confidence and talent with complex magic. He then threatened him and prepared a new spell to end the battle. Vilshin then conjured the third circle magic, falling ice, materializing a huge mass of ice. With the order to die, the ice was launched towards his rival, who merely observed the attack. Suddenly, a massive ice cube formed on the ground, trapping the opposing mage inside it. Not understanding what had happened, the bandit found himself unable to move within the prison. Outside, two columns of earth crossed over the ice cube, completely sealing the trap. Trapped, Vilshin could not believe that his spell had been blocked while the other watched him from outside. Soon after, the conjurer raised his hand and invoked the spell Earth Spear. With a simple clenching of his fist, he activated the attack. With that, multiple earth spears erupted from the ground and pierced the ice prison from all sides. Vilshin questioned how a second circle mage could use a third circle magic. In response, the rival merely challenged him to guess how that was possible. Vilshin then realized that he was not only facing someone capable of casting third circle spells, but also someone who mastered 4 different attributes. At the moment, he understood he had been deceived from the start. An earth spear struck him. After the battle, the victor merely observed the body of his fallen opponent under the sunset light. He concluded that his journey there was worth it. After all, that fight taught him how to combat other mages. Soon after, near the lake, a strangely appearing creature emerged, smiling amidst a field of bodies. Days earlier, the young man recalled having created an experimental potion he called Magic Circuit Deer. Then he fell to the ground, writhing after ingesting the substance. Thanks to this, he reached the third circle while energy flowed from his eyes. Back in the present, he observed the body of the mage, thinking about how to prove his feat to the Baron. Soon, his attention was drawn to the wand that the bandit had used during the fight. Then he knelt down and used an appraisal magic on the object. The analysis revealed it to be a magical stone wand that reduced casting time and increased the effectiveness of ice spells. At that moment, Peric rushed to the scene, relieved to find him safe. The knight explained his concern while the young man justified his delay due to the strength of the opponent. When asking about the other bandits, the ally confirmed that they had been defeated and that Enoch was still fighting against the leader. Before they left, the young knight allowed him to ask a question. Holding the wand, he wanted to know what should be done with the bandits' belongings. Peric replied that by order of the Baron, he could keep any item that interested him. With that, the mage thought of Baron P's generosity and decided he would make good use of the wand. Once reunited with the knights, he was congratulated for his good work, responding that it had been a great experience. Amidst the group, the leader of the bandits, Varga reacted with disbelief at the news of Vilshan's death. Aware that he would be executed, he prepared a hidden blade to try to escape. With a sudden movement, he freed himself from his bindings, initiating his escape attempt. Soon after, he charged forward, spinning his blades against the knights to clear a path. Thus, he ran directly at Enoch, knowing he would only have one chance. His attack with the blade was promptly blocked by the commander's sword. Seizing the opportunity, Enoch disarmed him with a throwing technique that sent him flying. In the midst of his fall, Varese saw the enemy throw his own sword aside. As soon as he landed, he was immobilized by two knights while the commander questioned him about discarding his weapon. With a smile, Enoch drew a dagger and responded with a question. Then he positioned the dagger at the bandit's neck, explained that pride is something only for the living. After executing the leader, the warrior stepped away from the body and apologized to the others for the scene. The commander then justified himself to the mage, who congratulated him on the impressive work. Seeing the prisoners, the young man questioned Enoch about why he was leaving them alive, receiving the explanation that they could be survivors. Therefore, the knight planned to take the prisoners to the castle to confirm their identities before deciding their fates. Next, Harris ordered everyone to prepare to return, instructing the knights to move the bandits. While one of them was forced to stand up, another watched the scene with suspicion. Suddenly, this prisoner turned and ran towards the forest, screaming that he didn't want to die. Seeing the escape, Harris declared that he would take care of him and prepared to advance. At that moment, Asher interrupted him, stating that something strange was happening. As soon as the fleeing bandit turned, pleading for help, Asher reacted immediately. Soon, Harris also sensed a different presence and identified the strong smell of blood in the air. The entire group then turned, looking in the direction the man was running. In the blink of an eye, the prisoner's head was thrown towards Harris. Everyone went on high alert upon spotting the figure of an orc in the forest. Not understanding what was happening, Asher quickly connected the dots and concluded that this was the creature the adventurers had failed to defeat. Shortly after, a massive orc charged forward with an axe in hand, displaying an even more threatening appearance. Using a detection magic, Asher noticed dozens of similar creatures approaching. That colossal figure with red eyes seemed to be the leader of the horde. Asher recognized him as the evolved version of the smiling orc that had spied on the previous battle. With a gesture, the orc pointed forward and ordered his goblins and minions to attack. Immediately, Enoch commanded the knights to take defensive positions and focus on the goblins. The orc leader advanced with a devastating strike, which was directly blocked by Enoch's sword. With the impact, the knight was thrown back by the force of the attack. While Enoch was still on the ground, the creature raised its foot to crush him. At the last moment, two soldiers rushed in and blocked the monster stomp. Seizing the chance, Enoch lunged forward and made a deep cut in the creature's chest. The orc fell under the watchful eyes of the knights, even spitting blood. The leader maintained his smile. Soon after, he grabbed the goblin that was beside him. To everyone's astonishment, he simply devoured the creature. With that, the wound on his chest completely closed. Observing that regeneration, Enoch concluded that they would not be able to return to the castle safely. As soon as Enoch ordered everyone to prepare for battle, the orc smiled with his weapon in hand. Immediately, the creature hurled its giant blade towards the knights. Thus, the weapon flew directly at Harris, who braced for impact. However, the knight managed to block the projectile with his own sword at the last moment. With the force of the blow, Harris's blade shattered into several pieces. Next, the shard of the destroyed sword flew directly at his face. Then the fragments hit him squarely, piercing his skin. With that, the warrior's body was thrown back with the violence of the attack. Seeing the scene, Peric shouted the name of his fallen companion. At that moment, Enoch warned him to be careful as the enemy was already in front of him. Thus, the young knight advanced and delivered a precise cut against the creature. However, his expression changed to one of complete surprise for he realized that the sword had become lodged in the orc's muscles, which contracted to immobilize it. While Perrick futilely tried to free his weapon, the adversary reached out to capture him. Suddenly, Asher used a skill and struck the monster with some stones. At the last moment, the mage called Perrick to him. Then, the knight slid to safety, relieved to have survived the imminent attack. Soon, he lamented not being able to recover his weapon, while Asher explained that the orc's strength increased after consumption. Thus, the young man remembered having used all his energy in the attack, questioning whether the creature was a legendary entity. However, Asher denied the theory, leaving the knight surprised by the answer given the enemy's strength. For the creature was indeed different from a common orc, as it could regenerate, command subordinates, and subjugate warriors. Even so, the mage considered the monster too weak to be classified as a special entity. Then he recalled the rule of magic, which imposes a limit on common mana, but a specific spell does not have this restriction. With that, he began to conjure the magic of geographic manipulation, forming a magical circle in his hands. Next, a wave of energy expanded from him, causing the entire battlefield to tremble. At that moment, the knights lost their balance with the tremor, while one of them believed that everyone would die there. Then, Enoch ordered them to remain calm and hold their positions, as that was Asher's magic. Even having given the order, the commander stood atop a rock pillar, observing the outcome. After all, the spell had raised the ground beneath their feet, isolating them from the horde of monsters that became trapped in the abyss below. Soon the mass of creatures was crushed as the ground violently rose beneath their feet. From atop the pillar, the knights watched the body of the fallen leader at the bottom of the abyss. Then Asher prepared a third circle spell, conjuring a large fireball. Shortly after, the flaming sphere descended like a meteor onto the remaining monsters in the valley. As Perrick celebrated the attack, Enoch asked him to maintain his dignity, but the young man replied that it was satisfying. However, the mage reflected that geographic manipulation has no limits of expansion, but its mana cost makes it impractical. Even so, he was disappointed with the result, as he expected greater power than that of the third circle spell. Suddenly, a roar from the bottom of the abyss interrupted his thoughts and drew everyone's attention. Even amidst the flames, the creature was still alive, devouring another goblin to regenerate. Then, Perrick questioned him about what to do, while Asher decided that if the monster did not die from the fire, he would try something else. With that, he conjured a wave of water that descended over the abyss, extinguishing the fire and hitting the orc. Soon after, he jumped from the rock pillar with his wand in hand while the young man shouted his name. During the fall, the mage prepared 2 ice spells simultaneously for a combined attack. Then, he launched a barrage of reinforced arrows that advanced directly against the orc leader. Thus, the strike hit the creature squarely, completely freezing it in a large block of ice along with its minions. Before the paralyzed enemy, Asher activated a magical circle on the ground while the adversary tried to break free. As soon as he landed, he concluded that regeneration would be useless if the body was completely immobilized. Soon, he ran past the creature to finish the confrontation once and for all. With the monster smiling, the conjurer prepared a new sphere of energy in his wand. Then he launched a frozen orb directly at the target. The impact completely froze the orc, and he declared the conquest complete. Meanwhile, the bustling magical city of Virus continued its routine. Their 2 men were conversing on a balcony about the latest news circulating. One of them commented on the ceiling of the magic tower and the explosion of its energy source, questioning the truth of the story. At the same time, a group of mages discussed the disappearance of the tower's members and the extent of the damage. For public speculations varied between divine punishment and a planned disaster, but scholars had their own theories. Then one of the hooded mages concluded that someone must have prepared the ceiling of the boar tower. With that, the mustache man whispered a rumor about secret experiments that would have provoked an attack on the tower. Upon hearing the information, the hooded figure reacted instantly, spilling his coffee. He then grabbed the man by the collar and demanded that he repeat what he said, leaving him completely confused. Suddenly, the red-haired mage, Raelin, removed her hood, asking what had happened. In a serious tone, she completed the question, demanding to know what happened to the Bomer Magic Tower. Back in the Baron's domain, the return of the subjugation team was celebrated with a toast. As soon as the mission against the bandits ended, they returned to the castle where PY offered a banquet in their honor. During the feast, the noble congratulated everyone for their work and noted Asher's absence. Soon after, he noticed the wizard approaching and announced his arrival to the guest. Then he entered the hall accompanied by Conrad, asking if he had arrived too late. With that, the Baron welcomed him with a glass of wine, assuring him that he arrived at just the right time. After thanking him, the conjurer commented on the presence of soldiers at the banquet, and the host replied that social status did not matter. The feudal lord then changed the subject, questioning about the unusual strength of the bandits they faced. While drinking, Asher agreed that with that level of skill, they wouldn't need to steal to survive. Soon, an assistant handed a document to the Baron, who offered it to the guest so he could understand the situation. Thus, the report revealed that the leaders of the bandits were wanted criminals, former gold rank adventurers who fled after killing their companions. Upon reading the document, Asher finally understood the reason for the high bounty of 10 million elk on their heads. Then he realized why the Baron seemed so pleased, as the damage would have been severe without his help. Suddenly, he noticed the host staring at him with a strange expression and asked why. In response, Piety praised him for taking care of the bandits and the monster, revealing that the Adventurers Guild sent their thanks. The Baron apologized for getting carried away and composed himself. He then solemnly thanked the wizard for rescuing the villagers and allowing the victims to have proper funerals. Shortly after, he raised his glass and proposed a toast to the sorcerer who saved the territory of Pate. With that, everyone in the hall raised their cups and toasted in honor of Sir Asher. The banquet that followed had a different atmosphere from the Magic Tower, with everyone enjoying themselves together. Thus, that warm and unpretentious place contrasted with the cold treatment he was used to receiving. For the first time since escaping the tower, Peric pulled him to drink with the others. With that, the conjurer managed to smile genuinely while holding the mug. Far away, Raylan watched the Borm Magic Tower, unaware of the turmoil its collapse would bring. Seeing the structure intact, she concluded that the rumors were exaggerated until someone called her. Then, a man returning from Varen confirmed he had heard about the energy source, but commented that the building looked fine. Roblin interrupted him to ask directly where Verdun was. Not knowing how to respond, the traveler simply pointed to a bulletin board where a crowd was gathered. On the board, there was a large list with the names of the missing people. Upon understanding the situation, her expression changed completely as she looked at the list. Then, Rosalind observed the mural with the photos, stopping in disbelief in front of Verdun's face. For the notice stated that Verdun, the missing number 31, had been exposed to the energy source and his body had not been found. With that, she remembered their last conversation when he promised he would be there waiting for her return. Thus, the image of Verdun smiling shattered in her mind along with the possibility of never seeing him again. Then, the mage covered her face with her hands, beginning to collapse to the ground. Suddenly, an aura of red energy exploded around her as she screamed, refusing to accept that loss. Soon, the explosion intensified, releasing all her anguish in a final scream. At that moment, a hand touched her head while a voice told her to stop, as it wouldn't change anything. Thus, Raylan lifted her gaze and recognized the man in front of her as Lord Valdek. Kneeling on the ground, she asked him what exactly had happened at the Magic Tower. While helping her to stand, Volk explained that the energy source went mad and annihilated everyone in the central area. Moreover, all data, research records, and even the magic circle of the vault were destroyed. The master of the tower then lamented the immeasurable loss of the Second Circuit, the books, and the artifacts. However, the most lamentable loss for him was that of Subject 77, as his brain could have restored the lost result. Back to Raglan. Valdek placed his hand on her shoulder and revealed that he had found clues about the culprit who escaped. Thus, she questioned him, and the elder explained that someone had disappeared 3 hours before the incident and was tracked with the help of other magical towers. As a result of the investigation, he revealed a necklace with a red, triangular emblem that he had discovered. As soon as she saw it, the mage recognized it as the emblem of the organization known as Black Hour. For the Black Hour was a secret group that not only researched magic, but used it as a means to govern the world. Beldic then confirmed that they were involved in the incident, although he did not know how they had infiltrated. He then announced the creation of an extermination unit and offered Roblin a place on the team. With that, the sorceress crushed the emblem in her hand with all her strength as she knelt with her eyes glowing red. Velsic understood that he already had his answer. Days later, at the Adventurers Guild in the domain of Pate, an officer received Asher for a conversation. Thus, the representative began the meeting by formally apologizing to Sir Asher for the incident. He then explained that the guild had underestimated the danger of the orc even after the failure of the gold rank adventurers. Relieved by Asher's understanding, the man handed over the certificate with the reward for the subjugation. Thus, the document detailed a total reward of 24 million elk, but the final amount after taxes was only 12 million. However, the officer justified that the 50% fee for non-members was an imperial law that could not be ignored. With that, he revealed with a smile that there was only one legal way to avoid the taxation, and the warrior deduced that it involved becoming an adventurer. Soon, the deduction was confirmed with enthusiasm when the officer explained that due to being a special case, he could start directly at silver rank to reduce the taxes. Still, even with the insistence to sign the form, the young man set down his cup, aware that becoming an adventurer would restrict his future actions. Finally, he interrupted the man with a smile and asked for the payment to be processed that way, as his priority was to strengthen himself for his revenge. In the warehouse of the Adventurers Guild, he prepared to conduct his research. With that, he removed the sheet covering the body of the orc variant to begin a thorough investigation. Soon, he realized that the fabric was a preservation artifact, something he did not expect to find in that guild. Upon analyzing the body, he noted that the condition of the corpse was far from ideal for research. Thus, the analysis revealed that in addition to the red pupils and skin, the torn mouth and the muscular physique were its most striking characteristics. Even so, such traits did not correspond to those of superior species, and its intelligence was not exceptional, leading him to classify it as a mutation. Despite the conclusion, something about that classification seemed incomplete. After all, the mutation alone did not explain the regeneration and monstrous strength obtained through consumption. Suddenly, his attention was drawn to a specific detail on the creature's neck. The mark appeared to be a scar. The orc's regeneration was able to restore a burned body, but it could not heal that small wound. With that, he concluded that the regenerative ability must have been acquired after the creature received that scar. In fact, it was the mark of an incision, a method to acquire powers after birth that until then was only possible through evolution. Therefore, the most likely conclusion was that someone had created that variant artificially, which represented the worst possible scenario. As he prepared to leave, the investigator told Conrad and his companion that they did not need to accompany him for the farewell. However, Conrad insisted that it was the least he could do since his life had been saved. At that moment, the traveler showed the ring and the cloak he had received, stating that he already had more than enough as a reward. Both confirmed that it was a well-deserved reward, and he thanked them for the words. Soon he said goodbye to continue on his way while they wished him well until they met again. As he was walking away, he heard Conrad shout that he would have the support of the Merchant Guild Conrad in any city he visited. Thus, he continued his route into the forest. His journey took him to the village on the border between the Pith territory and the Baron of Martis. As soon as he arrived, he dispelled the flight spell while consulting a map he had with him. The map confirmed that this was the only village on the way between the city and the barony. While buying an apple, he planned to rest there so that the timing of his journey would be perfect. As he bit into the fruit, he heard whispers coming from a group of men nearby. Observing the conversation, he realized that he could obtain some useful information there. Then he cast a wind spell to listen, discovering that the main problem was the goblins. The conversation revealed that the creatures had taken all the livestock, forcing them to hire adventurers, although one of them thought they could solve it on their own. One of the men confirmed that by order of the chief, the problem with the goblins would be resolved by the adventurers by the next morning. For the villagers, goblins were pests that started with small thefts, but could escalate to attacks that destroyed entire villages. Therefore, hiring adventurers was the standard response to the situation, something that did not seem unusual. Soon after, the conversation shifted to a rumor about a monster that a man named James had supposedly seen in the forest. Despite the village chief's order to keep quiet about the matter, one of them decided to tell the story anyway. Thus, the narrative began days earlier when James went to the forest to check the traps he had set up as usual. While he was there, he heard the sound of a boar screaming and turned to see what it was. Before him stood a goblin with a torn mouth larger than an orc, devouring the boar, fearing that the adventurers would charge extra. One of the men requested silence, and with that, the traveler dispelled his listening magic. That unexpected information about a large goblin with a torn mouth caught his attention. Then he smiled upon realizing that it was a coincidence hard to ignore. Meanwhile, in the nearby forest, the hunt for the goblins had already begun. With a precise throw, a spear flew through the air and struck one of the goblins squarely. Behind the bushes, the two hired adventurers watched the outcome of the attack. At that moment, the archer Verna asked her partner Locke if he had improved his skills. Shortly after, Locke teased her about the hit, but the leader Iris intervened, reminding them to stay focused on the mission. With that, Mild asked the commander if she had found any signs of the goblins. Then she pointed to a nearby cave, identifying it as the likely lair of the creatures. As they gathered, Iris explained that the bone totems were a symbol of hawk goblins and that the cave's terrain was the main danger. Next, the leader ordered to destroy the totems and traps before entering, and the others agreed. Soon after, Iris cast an enhanced vision spell, causing MNA to notice a sudden change in her sight. Following that, the leader confirmed that now everyone could see in the dark without needing torches, being praised for her reliability. With the preparations completed, Iris signaled for the group to advance into the dark cave. However, before entering, she suddenly stopped, and MNA questioned her about what was wrong. Still, Alida replied that it was nothing, although she had the impression of sensing a mana presence nearby. Finally, the forest surrounding the cave remained silent for a moment. Inside a dark cave, a source of light indicated the way deeper. Just ahead, some goblins were performing a ritual around a campfire. Suddenly, one of them did not notice a glimmer coming from the darkness of the tunnel. In the next instant, an arrow pierced the head of one of the creatures to the surprise of the one beside it. With that, the adventurers quickly advanced into combat. At that moment, the two warriors entered the fray, cutting down the goblins with their swords. Meanwhile, the archer commented that everything seemed to be going well, but the mage warned her not to let her guard down. After the fight, the group gathered to observe the dark passage just ahead. At that time, Imene offered to explore the path while Iris asked her to be careful and send a signal. As she advanced, the young woman found a path littered with goblin bodies scattered on the ground. Suddenly, her expression turned serious. Then, the swordsman asked what was wrong, and she replied that she had just heard something strange. From the shadows, an unknown silhouette slowly revealed itself. Soon after, a huge creature rose from the ground. In astonishment, the entire group turned to face the figure that had appeared before them. At that moment, everyone understood that it was a giant mutated goblin not described in the mission. With weapon in hand, Iris announced that she would focus on bringing it down and explain the plan. Thus, she instructed MNA to hit the goblin's right, while Locke and Mile would buy time for her to finish it off. Following the plan, the archer jumped from a rock and readied her bow for the shot. Then, she aimed accurately at the target. With that, the arrow struck the creature's eye squarely. Then, seeing the monster react, Locke shouted for Mile to raise the shield immediately. Shortly after, the two advanced together with their weapons enveloped in energy. However, as he jumped to attack, Locke's strike had little effect. In the midst of his advance, he realized that something was wrong, for the giant hand of the goblin was getting closer to grab him. At that moment, Iris prepared a mana explosion spell. Soon after, she shot multiple energy spheres that hit the goblin's body. With the impact, the creature recoiled, screaming. So great was the force of the attack that had hurled another monster at them. Surprised, Locke shouted upon realizing that the creature had just thrown a goblin. At that moment, Imene yelled for Iris to duck as the body was flying directly towards her. From the shadows, Asher used his skill to deflect the projectile in midair. As a result, a burst of energy struck the goblin mid-flight, altering its trajectory. Shortly after, the projectile smashed against the stone wall right next to the mage. Fallen on the ground, she observed the stain on the wall. At the same time, a new arrow was shot at high speed. This time, the shot precisely hit the other eye of the giant goblin. With the impact, the monster finally fell to the ground, defeated. Following that, the group ran to check on Iris, and she replied that she was fine. Even confused, the young woman commented that the goblin's trajectory changed in the air, saving her from a direct impact. Finally, Locke suggested that everyone return to the village to collect the reward as the mission was complete. Once hidden again, Asher watched the group leave and remarked that it was good. Nothing worse had occurred near the goblin's body. He revealed that he had followed the group invisibly to observe one of the specimens. Thus, he concluded that although all the other specimens he encountered had a torn smile, that goblin was a different type. Then he understood that unlike the other variants, that goblin was merely a failed experiment. While watching the group, Iris instructed everyone to check the area for any remaining monsters. With that, Asher realized that the mage was highly sensitive to mana, and it was no coincidence that she had sensed him before. At that moment, he lamented not having been able to gather any useful information from the creature. Suddenly, a voice surprised him. Soon, a man emerged from the back of the cave, commenting that someone had appeared during his absence. Immediately, Iris questioned the man's identity and warned him not to come any closer. The newcomer then introduced himself as the caretaker of the place they had just destroyed. He then explained that the creature exposed the location by building a totem, as the brain manipulation did not contain its instincts. Next, he asked the group if they noticed any unusual behavior in the goblin. In light of the silence, he deduced that there was nothing special about the creature and worried about the reaction of the professor. He soon decided that he needed to fix what had been done, which meant that everyone there would have to die. Upon hearing the threat, the adventurers took up combat positions. At that moment, Iris asked if he would fight alone, and the man confirmed that he would do so to ensure they did not reveal the location. As a last attempt, she asked if a promise of silence would be enough to avoid combat. However, he dismissed the proposal, stating that he had no intention of letting them leave. With a sinister smile, he confessed that in fact, he only wanted to hear them scream. As he advanced towards the group, he asked who would like to die first. Suddenly, an unknown voice declared that the only one to die would be him, making him laugh at the bravado. At that very moment, he realized that the voice had come from behind and tried to find out who had spoken. Soon after, Asher appeared behind him, questioning his threats about screams and death. The man knelt in a defensive posture as the intruder asserted that he was the one trying to pretend to be strong. With his body enveloped in energy and preparing a spell, Asher then asked if the man did not agree. Thus, Asher advanced towards the man, stating that he did not intend to intervene. Even so, his intervention became necessary to prevent the group behind him from being annihilated. With that, he remembered that the man had referred to the goblin as a test subject. Moreover, the mention of a figure called Professor also caught his attention. In light of that certainty, the adversary looked at him seriously and asked who he was. Then Asher refused to answer while preparing a large magic circle. The caretaker stated that it did not matter, even if his identity was not revealed. He then advanced, surrounded by an aura, assuring that the fact of Asher dying by his hands would not change. In response, the mage prepared a spell of multiple fire arrows. The caretaker, however, cut each of the arrows with his energy attacks. At that moment, the man's sword strike collided directly with the magic shield. Soon after, the shield broke and released a pulse of mana that hurled the enemy backward. Landing, he realized that the opponent's speed came from his legs, reinforced by energy. Meanwhile, Asher also noticed the enemy's superior speed and decided that he would need to change his combat strategy. The caretaker then praised Asher's magical speed and announced that in this case, he would also increase his own speed. With a challenge, he leaped off a wall to attack the mage directly. In response, Asher prepared a double spell, combining the winter gale and ice spells. The ability to use the elements of ice and winds simultaneously surprised the opponent. With that, he shot a blast of ice at his opponent. Even recognizing the skill of the attack, the man dodged each projectile with agility. Soon after, he jumped over Asher, claiming that the attack would be useless if he missed the target. The mage, however, remained still with his head down. Then, the caretaker's energy strike passed inches from his head. At the last second, Asher leaned back and completely dodged the attack. The dodge surprised both the enemy and Iris, who did not understand how a mage reacted at that speed. Right after, he activated an ignition spell, engulfing himself in flames. At that moment, a huge explosion of fire engulfed the area where the caretaker was. After the explosion, rain began to fall over the location. Amid the storm, the enemy realized he had been lured into a counterattack and assured that the trick would not work again. Asher then questioned whether traps would no longer work and declared that from that moment on, he would fight like a true mage. Suddenly, the ground began to shake and rise, causing Iris to scream from the jolt. As the earth pillar continued to rise, the group tried to understand what was happening. Upon seeing that the pillar had stopped, Iris recognized the spell as terrain manipulation and was surprised by its use in combat. Moreover, she noted that due to the quick conjurations and large-scale spells, his mana reserve must be immense. Thus, she concluded that this combat style was something she had never seen before. At that moment, the caretaker mocked Asher for having fled into the air after promising to fight like a mage. Suddenly, he realized that the opponent not only floated, but also lifted all the adventurers along with him. He soon noticed that the previous flames had melted the ice fragments, creating a puddle of water at his feet. At the same time, the mage extended his hand towards the water. Not understanding the intention, the caretaker looked up. Meanwhile, Iris watched the scene closely. As the enemy looked up, the mage identified the new attack as lightning magic. At that moment, Asher activated a Thirtle lightning spell, which few academy professors could use. The energy of a spell was so intense that he needed all his effort to control it. Surprised, the caretaker questioned Asher's identity for his ability to use fire, ice, wind, and even the lightning element. Soon after, Iris realized that the young man was using a triple conjuration to combine the elements at once. The combined attack resulted in an explosion that raised a huge cloud of dust. The smoke slowly began to dissipate. As soon as the dust settled, the mage floated down to the ground and asked the caretaker about a similar orc. Then he questioned him if all the creatures were related to the professor. Fallen and injured, the man understood that Asher was responsible for what happened to the orc. With a smile, he asked if the young man had come from the Ark. At that moment, the mention of the Ark left Asher visibly confused. The caretaker dismissed him from knowing, but the mage demanded the location of the professor, revealing his interest in the experiments. Even recognizing the danger, the man began to reveal the location of the professor. However, in a twist, he decided he would die along with Asher and spat something from his mouth. In the last instant, he activated a magical shield to protect himself. He soon understood the man's response and prepared one last annihilation spell. With regret, he lamented that his efforts to obtain a lead on the gestures were in vain. Still, he decided to focus on what needed to be done and walk towards the group of adventurers. With a dark silhouette and glowing eyes, he rose before them to announce his decision and declared that everyone there would have to follow his orders. Back in the village, Iris informed Asher that she had followed his orders and received extra compensation from the chief. She explained that the payment was 1.2 million Yelke in exchange for silence about the mutant goblin. As soon as he confirmed the end of the agreement, Asher handed her a pouch of coins, asking her to accept it. In her surprise, he clarified that this amount was the commission for the mission. He then requested that the group accompany him to the city of Marts. During the journey, Iris took the opportunity to question him about the theory of elemental magic, and soon the group arrived at their destination. Upon entering the city, Asher observed the streets carefully while searching for a bank. While the others headed to the guild to submit their reports, Iris was tasked with guiding him. Since he expressed the desire to claim the reward and open an account, she suggested they go to the town hall first. Confident, she took the lead, claiming to know Marts very well. From a distance, the rest of the group commented on how calm the leader seemed even after the incident in the cave. The first destination was the town hall of Marts, responsible for managing the rewards. At the entrance, a guard tried to stop him for not having verifiable identification. The situation was resolved when he presented the guarantee from Baron Python. Inside the building, an official greeted him enthusiastically, declaring he had already heard of his deeds. The gratitude stemmed from the fact that his family lived in the Baron's territory, which had been protected by Asher against bandits. Unexpectedly, the man also granted him a new identification document. Thanks to this, he was able to open his bank account without difficulties. He still had the old account in Vienne, but he knew that using it could attract the attention of the master of the tower. With that in mind, he preferred to exercise caution. Next, he visited a blacksmith, asking for his weapon to be transformed into a staff. The blacksmith estimated 3 days to complete the job and handed him a temporary staff. As they walked, Iris wanted to know why he preferred this type of weapon, and the answer was that he had gotten used to brooms. Shortly after, they arrived at the public library of Mart. Curious, the mage asked if he was looking for enchantment books, but warned that they might not be compatible with his level. He replied that the basics would be sufficient, and she wanted to know how many he intended to take. To her surprise, Asher stated that he wanted them all. In the great reading room, the librarian tried to intervene upon noticing the pile of books gathered. Asher requested that the amount be charged to his account and that the volumes be delivered to his hotel. With the confirmation, the librarian celebrated the largest sale in the history of the place. At the end of the day, Iris rested exhausted on the table while he remained focused on a book. Catching her breath, she asked if he had taken him to all the places he wanted. He confirmed that it was enough for that day, leaving her surprised by the simple answer. Soon after, Iris realized she had never asked his name and decided to question him. Behind the book, he introduced himself as Asher, but said she could call him whatever she wanted. She accepted the suggestion and asked to speak more casually. Seizing the chance, Iris finally wanted to know the reason for his presence in the cave. The question left him thoughtful without an immediate answer. After reflecting, he decided to give a vague excuse, saying he was pursuing that man. In response, she seemed to understand the situation. Then she remembered the questions asked about the professor inside the cave and began to piece things together. Asher commented that although he hadn't accomplished much, the day had already been long enough for her to rest. Still, Iris offered to accompany him since he was new to the city, but he declined the offer. On the street, she bid him good night, stating she would see him the next day. As she walked away, she discreetly celebrated the end of a long workday. Soon after, she threw herself onto a bench, murmuring that he was indeed a strange man. Reflecting, she acknowledged his magical mastery, capable of manipulating all elemental attributes with an immeasurable mana reserve. Moreover, he mastered theories superior to those of many professors, and also had a talent for teaching. His face also indicated that he must be quite popular. Even so, when talking to him, his posture was rigid, almost like that of Scarecrow. Suddenly, she held her face in confusion as his image insisted on appearing in her mind. She concluded then that he was the most skilled mage she had ever met, a rare talent. Determined, she decided that the next day she would ask even more questions about elemental magic. At that moment, a distant explosion caught her attention. She turned abruptly in the direction of the sound. She soon realized that the Lorax Hotel was on fire. Immediately, she remembered that this was where Asher was staying. Amid the blaze, a human silhouette floated in the air. Harris looked at the scene, unable to believe what she was seeing. The figure amidst the flames revealed itself as Asher with his eyes shining intensely. Thus in a laboratory, a hooded figure informs a bespectacled man that Surgeon is dead. Then the man asks who killed him, and the hooded figure replies that they found traces of offensive magic. Upon hearing the conclusion that someone else had murdered him, the man throws a vial at the hooded figure's face. After that, he warns him not to play dumb. With a serious look, he repeats the question about who killed Surgeon. However, the hooded figure explains that they have not yet confirmed the culprit, and the man laments the loss of Surgeon before asking about the test subject. Soon the subordinate confirms that all traces of Surgeon and the test subject have been completely erased. With that, the professor criticizes him for not also taking care of who killed Surgeon. At that moment, he connected the deaths of the Goblin and Surgeon to the silence of the two test subjects from the Baronia Pyth. With the experiment nearly complete, he wondered if the ARC group had already discovered them. He then orders the hooded figure not to return until they have killed the responsible party. Soon, the messenger departs, determined to find the culprit at any cost. Meanwhile, at the hotel, Asher was practicing basic enchantment magic when a voice greeted him. At the same moment, while he continued practicing, the voice warned him to fall asleep quickly, as his last moment would be when he lay down. Suddenly, the hooded man hidden under the bed found the silence in the room strange. Upon seeing the bone of the earth spell forming, he reacted in surprise at being discovered. With that, Asher attacked him directly with his staff, forcing him to jump back in surprise. Soon after, the enemy floated in the air, surrounded by an intense aura of fire. Amidst the crowd, the assassin observed the use of explosive magic in a confined space. Because of this, he concluded that Asher was a Thirdal mage and decided to retreat for the time being. To cover his escape, he began shouting about a terrorist attack, spreading panic among the people. With that, Asher ordered everyone to flee and report the incident to the guards immediately. Amidst the chaos, he reflected on how the assassin managed to avoid his magical detection. He soon understood that the enemy had made a mistake by rushing too much. By completely erasing his existence, his presence became even more visible to Asher. Thus, he became like a dark hole on a blank page. An attack then hit him squarely. While fleeing, the assassin questioned how he had been sensed and what the ARC had sent, shocked by his opponent's lack of hesitation. Unfazed, Asher prepared a magic arrow spell. Soon after, the enemy dodged the projectiles while running through an alley. The assassin jumped back amidst the debris, trying to shield himself from the magical attack. From above, Asher observed and wondered if he had entered the building to avoid his attack. He soon landed in front of the building to continue the chase. Upon entering, he realized that the enemy had chosen a building occupied by a group of vagrants. At that moment, one of the men confronted him about the commotion, but Asher only asked where the assassin had gone. The man merely stared at him with an ironic smile, commenting on his impatience. He then made it clear that any information would come at a price. With a sigh, Asher realized there were no obvious escape routes in the area. The moment he concluded that the assassin was still nearby, a dagger was past his face. The enemy used the man as a shield, stabbing him in an attempt to hit Asher. Hidden behind the body, the assassin watched closely for Asher's reaction. He then glared at his opponent, recognizing the cowardice of that move. Without hesitation, he unleashed a shock wave that slammed the enemy against the back wall. Dazed by the impact, the assassin quickly devised a plan. Lure him into expending energy on a magical barrier, and in that interval escape using a smoke bomb. With the plan in mind, he leaped arm for the final attack. As he waited for Asher to raise the barrier, he was surprised to see that the mage remained still. Suddenly, he recognized the bone of the earth spell forming. To his surprise, the mana was concentrated at the tip of the staff, not in a defense. At that moment, he understood that the opponent also mastered hand-to-hand combat. The impact hit him squarely, forcing him to retreat. Then the spell suspended him in the air, immobilizing him. Desperate, the assassin resorted to his last resource, a smoke bomb. The explosion covered the entire area with a dense fog. To dissipate the black veil, Asher conjured a whirlwind. The smoke quickly dispersed, revealing a trail of blood on the ground. Suspicious, he wondered if the enemy had truly escaped. Suddenly, a firm voice interrupted him, ordering him not to move. Surrounded by guards, He was informed that he was under arrest for arson and acts of terrorism. Although the city of Mars slept, the report on the incident was carefully summarized. Then, Mayor Henry Dacre questioned whether Asher was indeed responsible for the terrorist act. Soon, an officer clarified that he appeared to be the victim of an assassination attempt that led to the confrontation. With that, the guiltmaster, Oscar, explained that the case seemed to be linked to another incident, and that was why he was overseeing the investigation. Thus, the mayor expressed concern for the newcomer and asked about the damages caused. In response, the officer informed that only the top floor of the inn was destroyed and a wanted criminal died, but the murderer remained at large. Additionally, he mentioned the testimony of an adventurer who encountered a mutant goblin and an armed attacker in a cave. However, Oscar revealed that when they visited the site, they found no trace of bodies or goblins. Thus, the space was completely empty with no signs of monsters or creatures. Therefore, the mayor concluded that an organized group was targeting adventurers and worried about the possibility of more incidents. Next, the master confirmed the suspicion and explained that he tried to assign a bodyguard for the young man, but encountered a problem. He revealed that a rumor spread throughout the town, causing adventurers and soldiers to refuse to protect him. Faced with the situation, the mayor decided he would speak with his own knights about the matter. The next day, at the town hall reception, Asher was waiting with his new staff, which had been completed quickly. Then, just as he thought about starting the pursuit, a voice announced his entrance into the room. Soon, a knight introduced himself as Jason, the vice captain of the Knights of Marts, and informed that he would act as his bodyguard. He then asked if there were any questions, while the young mage observed him in silence. At that moment, the young man understood that the suspicions about him had been lifted, but he noticed the knight's youth. Therefore, he questioned whether he could leave, but Jason imposed the condition that he accompany him at all times. Still, he lamented the situation but agreed to leave, leaving the guard confused about the destination. After walking for half a day, the sun began to set. Exhausted, Jason finally asked where exactly they were going. Then, the mage remembered the condition, and while the knight complained about the hours of walking, he announced that they had arrived. Thus, in front of a large building, he revealed that this was the place he intended to visit. Not understanding, Jason questioned why they had walked all day to get there. However, without answering, the young man unleashed a massive explosion of fire against the building. While the knight watched in shock at the explosion, he explained that he was there to find someone. With a serious look, he revealed that he was searching for the assassin who had tried to kill him the day before. In response to Jason's question, he confirmed that the enemy was indeed at that location. Finally, he explained that he had managed to briefly touch the assassin's body to cast a tracking spell. With that, he explained that the tracking spell trace linked the target's mana flow directly to his own. Since the trace spell had not been dissipated, it meant that the assassin had not yet noticed him. As Jason commented on the power of magic, he suddenly noticed something unusual on the ground. Thus, the explosion revealed the entrance to a hidden underground passage. With his magic, the young mage confirmed that the target's trail led directly into the passage. Then he asked him if he knew that tunnel, and the knight denied, explaining that the entrance to that area was not there. Thus, Jason understood the gravity of the situation, as an unmapped tunnel leading out of the city was a significant problem. This represented a huge and dangerous security flaw in Martis. With his sword in hand, the vice captain declared that they needed to seal that location immediately. However, the mage interrupted him, stating that the priority was to pursue the assassin before anything else. Even so, Jason suggested calling for reinforcements, but he refused the idea, explaining that they would lose the target if they did. Then he jumped into the passage, asserting that immediate pursuit was the only right decision to make. Then the knight observed the dark passage, displeased with his companion's attitude. With a shout, he ended up jumping into the tunnel, complaining about how all mages were annoying. Shortly after, the assassin began to walk down the long, dark underground corridor. In his thoughts, he lamented having wasted so much time at the location. After escaping, he needed to heal his wounds, but the delay made him fear that the professor would try to kill him. Still, he dismissed the idea of fleeing as he knew he wouldn't be able to escape the clutches of gluttony. With no other option, he entered a room, hoping that the professor would show some mercy. Then the figure greeted him sarcastically, mentioning his famous face in Martes. With that, the man reprimanded him for creating a spectacle that alerted the mayor and the guild about their presence. He then demanded a clear and concise explanation of what had happened. Thus, the assassin reported that after preparing an ambush, he was detected and attacked by a large-scale spell. Afterward, he explained that even after using a smoke bomb to escape, the mage pursued him the entire time. He then suggested that his escape was only possible because of the arrival of the knights. But the professor doubted that excuse. Suddenly, the leader seemed to understand what had really happened. Urgently, he ordered the assassin to remove his armor and burn it immediately. As soon as the armor was thrown into the fire, a magical tracking circle revealed itself on it. Thus, the criminal understood that a spell had been cast on him during the fight. With a panicked face, the professor shouted that they had been found. With no time to lose, he ordered to destroy all traces while taking the specimen, and the assassin agreed. At that very moment, a huge explosion of fire erupted at the entrance of the tunnel. Amid the flames, the fugitive commented that the trace reaction had disappeared, finally realizing what had happened. Soon after, the Wizard of the Night entered the room, and the enemy remarked that it was a pity for them. With the staff in hand next to Jason, the young man then declared that it was already too late. With the repetition that it was already too late, the two groups faced each other in a tense standoff inside the room. Thus, with a keen gaze, the young wizard began to analyze his opponents to understand the situation. By their combat stance, he quickly recognized the assassin and concluded that the man behind him was the professor. At that moment, the dark figure was associated with various monstrous creatures and cruel experiments. Then, the professor questioned him if he was the mad wizard, commenting that the Ark had sent someone strange. In light of the new mention of the Ark group, the young man decided that he would subjugate them first to extract information later. Next, he cast a earth spear, but the assassin moved to protect his master. However, the professor reprimanded him for messing everything up, and the subordinate merely apologized with no other choice. The man ordered his follower to take responsibility and buy time while he escaped. However, the wizard assured him that he would not go anywhere and shot a magic arrow to stop him. With a swift movement, the assassin jumped in front and blocked the spell. With the weapon in hand, he declared that he had orders to buy time. Faced with the block, the wizard realized that a low-power spell would not work, but a stronger one could eliminate the chance of obtaining information. In that moment of hesitation, Jason advanced and blocked the enemy's attack with his sword. With the opponent occupied, the knight shouted for him to go ahead, assuring that he would follow shortly after. In response, the wizard quickly advanced, enveloped in energy, to Jason's surprise. Soon after, he sped through the tunnel, leaving only a magical trace behind. Upon reaching the end of the passage, he stopped to look for any sign of the professor. Suddenly, a strong smell in the air caught his attention. Thus, he recognized the odor of bodies and spotted the figure waiting for him at the end of a long walkway. Then, the professor greeted him, expressing surprise at how quickly he had arrived, but happy to show his work. With a gesture, he revealed dozens of creatures trapped in dark cells behind him, asking what he thought of his creations. The young man then identified the creatures as gestures and confirmed that the man was the creator of all of them. Next, the professor explained that these were the failures that had not fully accepted his ideals. Shortly after, he picked up a remote control, assuring that they would be more than enough to deter an intruder. With that, he pressed the button and released all the creatures to attack the wizard at once. As a monster surrounded him, he prepared for an area attack to avoid wasting time. Then, he focused to prepare the double casting of the wave and thunder spells. With the combination, he unleashed a massive wave of thunder that swept through the hall and hit all the creatures. Thus, the professor was caught off guard by the powerful wave of energy. Finally, the impact of the devastating spell violently threw him backward, fallen on the ground and still feeling the effects of the magic. The professor called him a lunatic. Then he understood that the information about being just a third wizard was completely wrong. With that, he concluded that to control magic at that level, Asher had to be at least a fourth wizard. Still on the ground, the man lamented that his decades of research would be wasted if everything ended there. In a desperate act, he dragged himself to a large red button and pressed it hard. Thus, the action activated a containment capsule that rose from the ground, revealing a humanoid figure inside it. Soon after, he declared that it was time to awaken his masterpiece as the creature inside the capsule began to move. Suddenly, the young wizard appeared behind him and questioned where he had fled to. However, the professor asked how he had passed through the creatures, but received the answer that it was obvious. With a serious look, the young man simply stated that he had burned everything. Faced with that response, the man understood that a single mage could not have done that and confirmed his suspicion. Thus, with the reflection of the opponent in his glasses, he confidently declared that this was a fourth mage. Shortly after, he pointed to the creature in the capsule and asked what the young man saw beside him. With a smile, he described it as his masterpiece and his own daughter. As he pressed the button, he revealed that this creature was gluttony, the embodiment of his group's ideology. With that, he declared with conviction that this child represented the future of humanity. Without hesitation, The mage advanced to attack him before he could finish his sentence. However, he realized he had arrived a second too late, as the button had already been pressed. Thus, from the capsule, the creature emerged completely transformed, representing the ideal future of consumption and evolution. Seeing it support itself on the ground, the young man finally understood what the professor was trying to do. Still on the ground, the man celebrated that the mad mage's mana would now serve as nourishment for his creation. With a sinister smile, the creature stared at him with its bright, hungry eyes. Then, with a mouthful of teeth, it turned to him and declared that it was hungry. This declaration surprised the mage, who did not expect the being to be able to speak. Before he could react, the creature shouted again that it was hungry, releasing an aura of energy. Then it fixed its gaze on him and stated that he looked delicious, declaring that it would eat him. Soon he noticed that the enemy had enhanced its body with energy, demonstrating a skill that would take years to acquire. With that, he watched the artificial creation use its abilities to leap towards him. Then it attacked him with a series of quick strikes, targeting his blind spots and forcing him to defend himself. As he defended himself, the mage recognized that as a researcher, the creature was interesting, but the fight needed to end. Thus, with a shout, the monster charged and struck his energy shield with all its might. Immediately afterward, the young man responded with a staff strike that hit the creature squarely in the face. With the force of the impact, it was violently thrown back, shattering the ground upon falling. Finally, before the fallen enemy, the mage declared firmly that she was no match for him. To survive for 7 years as a test subject in the Born Magic Tower, the young man had to constantly suppress his explosive anger. Thus, back in his room after the experiments, he used those emotions as a driving force to complete his theory. With that, the creature was on the ground. The more his emotions were stirred by the battle, the more focused his expression became. Soon, his mind became clear and a cold rationality took control of his actions. Then, he nicknamed the professor's masterpiece mortal, whose physical abilities were comparable to those of the gesture of PY. Moreover, its regenerative capacity also proved to be equally impressive. However, the creature demonstrated an abnormally superior elasticity, flexibility, and speed. Despite this, the mage realized that the enemy's advantages ended there. When he tried to attack, the creature jumped out quickly. Suddenly, an earth spear emerged from the ground and struck it directly. Then, the young man revealed that the previous attack had only been a feint. Next, he prepared multiple magic arrows for the next attack. The creature, however, lacked the technique to distinguish tricks and only attacked with brute force. With that, a bone spike pierced its shoulder, revealing it as a beast in human form. With its body impaled by spikes, the mage declared that it was too weak to be called a masterpiece. Shocked by the defeat, the professor could not believe that his creation had fallen in such a way. Soon, he remembered his notes, which described how the creature absorbed the characteristics of its prey. Thus, it would become a being in constant strengthening that would transform it into the true Neo, the ideal evolution of humanity. Even so, that ideal being had been defeated in a completely one-sided manner. Then, the man understood that the creature was still weak and considered feeding it his own arm to restore its strength. With a new plan in mind, he decided that he would kill the mage to escape the place. Suddenly, the young man pointed his staff at him and demanded to know where the experiment records were. Then, he threatened him, saying he would kill his child right there if the records were not delivered. The professor, with no choice, agreed to the demand, thinking that this was an opportunity to survive. With that, he offered the research diary, claiming that it would prove the value of his work. Then the young man took the diary and began to flip through it quickly. Soon afterward, he threw it on the ground along with other notes, stating that he would not need that. Not understanding, the man questioned him about what he thought he was doing. The mage, however, recognized the value of the research, but he did not understand why it would be discarded. With a serious look, the young man simply explained that it did not align with his own ideals. As the professor begged for his life, the mage observed the notes on the terrorist plan. He then considered questioning him about arc and gluttony, but quickly changed his mind. As soon as he heard Jason approaching, the mage decided he needed to end everything to avoid complications. With that, he declared it was time to disappear while the professor pleaded for one more chance. Without hesitation, he activated the spell Ignite, and the man was completely consumed by flames. Soon after, the knight arrived at the scene and asked if Sir Asher was all right. In front of the campfire, he confirmed that he was safe and questioned him about the assassin. Jason then boasted about having landed a solid blow, assuring that the enemy must be in much worse condition. While reading a document, the mage understood from the evasive response that the target had escaped. At that moment, he realized that the document in his hands was in fact a map. As the knight asked about what was burning, he noticed that the terrain on the map was near Mart. His attention then turned to a red mark indicating a specific location on the map. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his head and bent over from the impact. With the sudden pain, he recognized the symptoms of mana exhaustion and decided to return for now. A few days after the subjugation of the professor, peace seemed to have returned to Martz with the exposure of the plan. Upon confirming the scientist's plans, the mayor became furious and put the Knights of Martz on high alert. With that, the warriors reinforced their defenses and announced that they would seal the passage. But that was no longer his concern. His new concern now was the injection of mana expansion stimulants. Thanks to the injections to his physical limit, he managed to shorten years of a mage's growth in just a few weeks. After the procedure, he took a deep breath to recover. With that, he declared it was time to move on to the next stage, having reached rank 3 in the elemental magic system. In a dark hall, a figure sitting on a throne questioned whether the professor was dead. Holding a wine glass, the man commented that it was one less annoying thing to worry about. Upon discovering that the mage had been responsible,